I'm sitting here with the most amazing woman who specializes in Connecticut and Florida, Hyleri Katzenburg. Thanks for meeting with me today.
Thanks, Steph. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. So tell me a little bit about referrals. I have given out a ton of referrals. I've gotten a bunch of referrals. Walk me through how you partner with somebody like me and keep in touch with them and make sure it's a seamless transition from me to you and selling a property down in Florida or in Connecticut or working with the buyer, either one.
It's a great question because, whoever referred you in the first place obviously had the trust of that client that they listened to their advice to come to me and use me. Right. So, I think it's always really important to stay in touch with the referring agent. I recently referred a client of mine. I had worked with his son and daughter-in-law in Connecticut and knew the father through that transaction and became friendly with him. And he was selling his home in the Tampa area, and I referred it to another agent. Yeah. And he wasn't obviously as trusting. He didn't know the other agent so well. And in the beginning, it was a little tougher to get the property sold, and they had some low offers. And it was really important that I stayed as the referring agent involved in the process, and that she communicated some of the concerns that he had, and I was able to sort of weigh in on, my feelings about it and give the information and stay on top of it. And really together we were a team to ultimately get the property sold for a great price, and he was really happy. But when he had some issues that, with the sale that were not necessarily the agent's fault, but he didn't know her enough to know that it wasn't her fault or trust her enough because he didn't know her as well. I was able to kind of nurse that along and explain that it was the market and, look, we massage the relationship to get to that great outcome. So, I think that's important because when you're working with new clients that weren't referrals, it takes time to build up that trust. And, there's a lot of agents out there that, are much more transactional. I'm a relationship agent, and, it's the ones that are sort of transactional to get the sale done rather than relationship oriented that, we kind of get some of the bad rep from.
Absolutely. I recently had a colleague of mine who's actually my financial advisor reach out, and he had a client who wanted to sell their house in central, more like Western Mass, which is probably, if you look on a map, it's about 2 hours from me. I'm not going to go 2 hours to sell a house, and that's not my area of expertise. So I reached out to a colleague, and for me, the first step is like making sure that we have similar communication style. That wasn't as, in your situation, you really needed to make sure that the communication that you and the trust that you built with that client are kind of similar, because if you've had such a successful relationship thus far, to be able to carry that similar communication was important. This person, I didn't know them that well. So it was, kind of I know the financial advisor really well. And so it was a nice send, referral, because I didn't have to prep them that much. Like, oh, this is a similar person to me, but he kept me in the loop the whole time, which was really nice. And they were very happy. They got over list price. It was amazing. So I think it can be a really wonderful partnership and a long-term one if you, continue to cultivate those relationships.
Absolutely.
And making sure that you have partners in various areas. For, the greater Boston area, we have a ton of people that go down to Florida. So partnering with you is so important to help my clients feel that not only can I support them here, but my trusted colleague, Hyleri, and her whole team, whether she's available or not, someone else will be able to be with them through the process of buying or selling their property. Because if it goes wrong, it goes really wrong. And there's a lot of agents out there. So it's all about who you know and making sure it's a smooth transaction.
And if you don't put your clients in the best hands when you have to refer them out, it blows back on you. So it's really important that those relationships are, vetted. And just like when you refer someone to an attorney for a closing, or, when you, an inspector, I sadly learned the hard way about that. I've been in this business for a really long time. I got my license at 18, working in my mother's brokerage in Ohio. And I've learned a lot of I've made every mistake to get to the point where I can look back and I can really advise my team on how not to do what I did then.
Or even a referral, Steph, I'm sending you someone who's looking in, Winchester. The most important thing is communication via text. Don't call them. They don't like to be called.
Absolutely.
Please just text them. And then I know that. So I'm prepared to be able to have those kind of communication styles that they prefer.
Absolutely.
Which is really, really awesome. So
absolutely. I once referred an inspector to somebody.
Yeah.
And, he had a certain, inspection, things got negotiated, bought the property. And then he fixed it up. He decided that a little bit, but it was more, cosmetic. He decided he wasn't going to move into it. So I turned around and sold it, ended up being a buyer that came directly to me. So I was a dual agent.
Oh, amazing.
I advised the buyer to use the same inspection company, which she did. They sent a different inspector than the one that had inspected it, same company, and came up with things that they didn't come up with on the other end. And it was really, my seller was really angry that he had to now fix things that he could have discussed before. So, I needless to say, do not recommend that inspector anymore. And, you have to be really careful because it does blow back on you, the people that you refer. And I always try to give at least 3 names whenever I refer anybody. So ultimately, these are who I recommend, but you're going to have to sort of talk to all of them and vet them yourselves. And I don't have a vested interest in who you use. If you want to use somebody else, that's fine too. And in fact, sometimes I prefer that, but
right. So it doesn't come back to you that they
something goes wrong. So.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, this is really helpful. And, if anybody's looking in the Florida or Connecticut area, you are an amazing partner. And so I'm excited to continue to send referrals your way.
And likewise for the Boston area.
Yeah. Awesome.
Bird, broker extraordinaire out of Boston. Yeah. And we're coming to the question here that I need to ask you, Steph. What are the key challenges your clients face when they're selling their homes? And how do you advise them to navigate these and prep their home in the big city? I'm in the burbs, so it's very different.
Sure.
You're selling more condos and townhomes as
Absolutely.
a family. So how do you advise your clients?
So a lot of it is, in advance of meeting a client, I think a lot of agents just go in and run a comparative market analysis, a CMA, and just hand that off. Instead of doing that, I really want to visit the property before I make any recommendations, number one, or price recommendations. A lot of times people will say, well, give me the home valuation. And I really don't like to do that because it's a very short-sighted, there's such a, huge array of things that could need small updates or big updates. And so it's really not prudent of me to just throw out a number because that could be a totally unattainable number, or it's a really low number and they get really offended. So I start off by just going to the property, walking through it, having them share their favorite parts of the property with me. And then I make, small or big recommendations. A lot of things that take into account in the valuation is, level of finish. Does the house need work? Painting, fixtures, all of those things are really small things that I advise to update. Sometimes people don't even want to do that. We have a listing outside the city and it is the client's sister who passed away. So he didn't want to do anything. We did do some painting. We did change a couple of fixtures just to bring, a brighter light into the condo. I recommended changing all the floors. Nope, didn't want to do that. I recommended, and it is a slippery slope. Once you start making recommendations, if I replace all the floors and then the kitchen's outdated and the bathrooms, once you start, you kind of have to
start noticing. I did that with my condo in Florida. I did everything, and then I thought, oh, but at least I have this great couch. But once I did everything else, I said to my husband, you're not going to believe this, but this couch doesn't work here anymore.
Right. So it's really hard. So I really kind of tune into how much money do they want to spend? Do you want to get 1.5 or are you going to be okay with like 1.2 or 1.1? Timing is important. If it's the middle of the summer or dead in the middle of winter, are you okay waiting a couple months to really capitalize on the spring market and the fall market? So I really try to partner with them to understand what their, what's the most important thing to them. Is it timing? Is it price? And then we sort of navigate it together to make sure the home is prepped. If staging is important and it's vacant or it's in disrepair, any of those things, I really try to make it the most approachable, welcoming place so a potential client can come in and absolutely envision themselves there. So I really try to do that with condos. What's really important as well is once you start getting offers is making sure that we have all the condo docs in hand. How much is in the reserves? If you have a healthy reserve, is the HOA high? Is it going to be, going up next year? These are all important questions that are part of the due diligence process with an attorney, and they're going to be asked. So why not get ahead of it?
Absolutely. We just had to pay a lot more in HOA fees so that we can build up our reserves in our condo in Florida. So
which is not a great thing to do, but it's important that people know that that's coming down the pipeline and that's disclosed. People do not like surprises ever. So making sure everything is out there as much as you can, and any special assessments. So some of the attorneys that I partnered with do an amazing job of due diligence with condos and making sure, hey, I went back 2 years in the meeting minutes and the special assessments, queued up for 2025. Is this on the agenda for next year? This looks like a huge, here we have repointing, which is the brick and mortar. That's very common in brownstones and row houses in Boston area. And that can be quite pricey. So understanding, hey, where are we in that with repointing projects, roof, and, other things like that.
Which also goes to speak to the fact that, having an expert advocate for you and understand these things. I think that sometimes, especially, I'm hearing from a lot of agents that with this new NAR settlement that people are thinking, oh, we're just going to sort of, not use an agent, or we'll go directly, or, and I think you're really penny wise and pound foolish, because you can really, what you don't know can really end up biting you.
Absolutely. And we do this, there's a reason why we both do this full time. It's a lot of work. Absolutely. And it's a lot of work to prep a home. It's a lot of patience. There's a lot of correspondences. You have to have contractors in your back pocket to help, and they have to be good. There's a million painters, but
and on the buy side, you've got the right inspector that, because it's tried and tested, the right attorney.
Yeah.
I've had attorneys that my clients have used that have really scrolled the deal and didn't understand how to get a creative or complicated deal done.
Right.
And, there's just you're tried and tested Rolodex, and your years of trial and error and learning from every deal is, presents a different set of interesting challenges and circumstances. And
for sure. So my experience mostly is, condos, row houses. We do some outside the city, but totally different from how you prepare your sellers for listing a home, because you're getting single family homes. You don't have an HOA. You are incurring all that cost. How do you prep your sellers if they're, do you prepare a sheet on age of everything, all of the systems in the house? What are your steps to, bring it home to market?
Honestly, I think it depends on who your seller is.
Yeah.
And you're right. We have to ask all the questions, what's most important to you? And then the next question is, what are you willing to invest time, money, elbow grease, whatever, to getting to that goal? and it runs the spectrum. You have people that, are willing to put in a lot. When Compass, had a great product, we still do, but it's not as robust as it was when a few years ago, pre-pandemic, called Compass Concierge. And I used that a lot. And it was an amazing program that gave, a lot of money based on the equity homeowners had in their home. And there was no, they can hire their own contractors and do all kinds of work, and then, pay it back on the back end when their home sold. And I used that a lot with my sellers. And honestly, I had a listing that ended up selling for over $3 million that
amazing
to someone who was, a hoarder. And we helped get it cleared. We helped get it repainted, floors restained, storage. I mean, it ran the gamut. We ended up selling it for over $3 million. It took us a year to get the house ready for market.
Oh my gosh.
But, it's the difference at that point between people thinking, maybe this is a tear down versus, wow,
hey, this is
really,
and has big bones, right? And we can live here and build a life here.
Exactly. So, I think as a realtor, one of the best assets you can have is having vision and seeing, the potential in something and what needs to be done, and, how this could, and sometimes it's done through virtual staging. I have a seller now who just built a beautiful home, but it's empty, and they don't want to put the money into, actually staging it.
Yeah.
So we're going to, virtually stage 5 rooms, show how it could be used. And then what we actually do is put not only the virtual staged photos up on the MLS, but we also have like a sandwich board with the poster in each room as people see it. So they, because buyers, by and large, unless they're in the industry, don't have vision. And that's why staging really sells. I mean, people wouldn't put the money into model apartments or model condos or model, if it didn't work. I mean, how often do you hear people say, can I buy the model just as it is? Or
always,
right?
Yeah, I absolutely agree with you. That's
and
awesome.
It's worth the investment. But, people say to me too, sometimes, should I do a pre-inspection? I never advise it, because especially in a seller's market, there are certain things that that if they come up in an inspection, you can, say, well, I'm not going to address that, and you can still make the deal happen. But if you know about it, you have to disclose it in the property disclosures.
Right.
So I don't necessarily advise my clients to do that unless they're ready to put money in before it goes to market to, address anything that, is wrong with it. And it just really depends. I've also tried it both ways, where I've had my sellers, do a lot of work beforehand, but in a seller's market, they really didn't need to.
Right.
Know,
it would go anyways, right? Whether they did it or not. Right.
And sometimes we tried it on the market a little bit, where a lot of sellers also have tunnel vision and think because they've done their house a certain way, that's what everyone's looking for, and everyone's going to want it and see the beauty in it. And, they don't, it's hard for them to be objective. So that's kind of where we come into.
I have a funny story. I am working with a client. He's selling his mom's house outside the city, and her favorite colors are orange, purple, yellow, and green.
Interesting.
Everything, and I mean everything, is orange, yellow. A lot of orange, mostly orange and yellow. The whole house, the exterior is orange. So I went in and I said, and it's an amazing neighborhood. And I'm like, oh, we're going to have to paint. I'm sorry. But he knows. So it's good, but it's
receptive to that.
Oh yeah. I mean, the dishwasher's orange, and I don't mean like a burnt orange. I mean fluorescent orange.
Interesting. Very interesting. And I, as a broker, I'm constantly doing my own properties in ways that I know for resale is as, monochromatic, and people can envision and see their own. And it's but recently I showed a property to a prospective buyer of mine and it was so colorful, but it just worked. It just worked. And it may not work
between tasteful and not tasteful.
Yeah, I don't happen to have the vision that this seller had to, make those bold choices and think it's going to work. But some people do have that ability to be colorful and appeal to the masses. I don't.
Yeah, exactly. Awesome. Well, that was super insightful. Thank you.
Thank you.
Connecticut real estate market evolved recently, and what kind of trends are you seeing in both buyers and sellers' behavior from both you personally and your team? What is the feedback in those two markets?
I think there's a lot of fear right now, and the election, the recent changes in the market, people are really afraid of overpaying. Buyers are terrified of overpaying, and I think now with also the NAR settlement, buyers are needing to sign a buyer's representation agreement. Connecticut was always a buyer agency state. So we always had to have buyers sign representation agreements in order to show them properties. However, the difference being that now that we don't have the what the seller is offering the buyer's agent, obviously buyer's agents don't work for free.
Right.
And so now buyers have to sign in their buyer's representation agreement before they even see a property, how much they're willing to pay their broker if the seller doesn't offer anything. And of course, we're always trying to do workarounds and work it into the offer, this amount, but they don't know that that's necessarily going to happen. And they're making a promise on the front end before really knowing how it's all going to necessarily shake out on the back end, while we still are in a very competitive market with low inventory and often multiple bids. And they're fearful that that amount that they may have to pay their buyer's agent if they try to work it into the offer, that may be the difference between, winning a bid and not winning a bid. Right. So there's a lot of fear. I know sellers are fearful too, because, they're not knowing how long this seller's market is going to last. In both towns, in Fairfield County, Westport and Fairfield, additionally Greenwich, all towns that we serve, they're going to be doing a reassessment of taxes next in 2025, which may be major sticker shock for a lot of sellers, because the last time, it's every 5 years. So the last time their properties were reassessed was 2020, before the big surge that the pandemic spurred. So it'll be very interesting to see what happens. Sellers who've been sitting on this 3%, not wanting to move because, they've got this great favorable, loan interest, right? So
do you anticipate people that have owned for a really long time to have that also sticker shock, and that might be the push they need to
primarily? I think that's where
their places on the market.
I do. I think primarily that's where the sticker shock is going to come, because people that have traded properties more recently,
understand.
Yes, I think, and honestly, a lot of those people are the ones that would want to be downsizing or making a move anyway, not the recent buyers. So I do hope that may be the difference that sort of makes people decide that, okay, we wanted to move, we were holding on to 3%, but, now it doesn't make sense to, pay these new high property taxes. And maybe that's what, spurs them on. And we really do need inventory here, because we still have a tremendous amount of demand, maybe even more so for people that were willing to move out, after pandemic, because they're not as tethered to the big city to have to commute in 5 days a week anymore. So maybe they're commuting 2 days a week or 3 days a week, or just completely working remotely. My daughter and her husband both work for Yelp, and they've completely closed their brick and mortar. And they were a very, that swanky culture that the office attracted people to want to
Sure.
work with the swing and the skates and everything. And they've completely shuttered up and they're totally remote. And, there's other businesses like that too. So people can move a little further away from the city now that they're, not as tethered as they were pre-pandemic.
I would imagine a lot of people this was like a test period, hold your property for a couple of years. And now that things have kind of settled since the pandemic, now it's normal. My sister works at McKinsey, or did work at McKinsey, but similar model that they said, okay, everyone, you can work 2 days a week. Now she's at an academic institution, and she has to go in again, just like your kid twice a week.
Well, conversely, Steph, you're in a big city.
Right.
And so we're the antithesis of where we're the,
Sure.
the suburbs of the city.
Yeah.
How do you, same question back at you. How do you feel that, your market's evolved? And tell me about buyer and seller, what you're seeing is and what's the temperature there?
I think that a lot of people are moving back to the city, which is really great. I have seen a noticeable increase in activity from buyers that have kind of been waiting to see what happens. I work with a lot of first-time home buyers, my team and I do. That 0.5% of interest rate dropped has, 2 weeks ago, I wrote 5 offers in one day. So there is huge uptick in activity. People are really excited about making offers. And so we're being really thoughtful and strategic about how we position our offers.
So you're still that properties are getting multiple offers in Boston.
Absolutely. Not only in the city, but outside the city as well. So I sort of cover the greater Boston area. I made an offer on a property. It was under $1 million, but still they had 12 offers, waiving all contingencies. And it was an older house. And so, my most important thing for my client is to protect, their best interest and their deposits. And so I told them I didn't feel comfortable waiving that inspection contingency just because you don't know what you're getting. And as a first-time home buyer, you're already nervous. So it's allowed us to sort of think through strategically every offer, but I would say in general, huge uptick in activity from buyers ready to, put in offers. I think what's really helpful for buyers too is to get an offer rejected. It teaches them about, hey, I was really strategic, right? It's a learning curve.
Right,
and, as far as
sellers, they seem to get a lot more bold with subsequent offers.
Absolutely. That's good. That's good. I think that's good. And also they get more comfortable with, okay, if I put an aggregate inspection contingency amount of $5K, well, let's do $10K, because a $5K could be anything. That's not that strong. Whereas $10K kind of looks a little better. If you're feeling really confident, let's push it to $20K. They kind of know all the variables that they can, adjust in their offer to make it a little stronger.
There's nothing better than an educated buyer.
Absolutely. And as far as sellers, I'm seeing places, it's really coming down to pricing. If places are priced well, they fly off. Multiple offers fly off.
How do you feel about pricing? Do you like to come on a little bit under market for more activity, or do you?
I really leave it to, I give my sellers all the information and I say, you have 2 choices. You can either price it aggressively. However, it's probably going to sit a little longer. We're going to wait to find the right buyer that's willing to pay that. If you price it a little under, you do run the risk of it not selling, and then, you'd have to price adjust up. But so I try to find a middle ground saying, it's up to you what strategy you want to have, but here's all the information. Here's what's selling price per square foot. And, in the city, we're anywhere between like 1,100 to 1,500 a square foot in parts of the Seaport area. In Back Bay, it's that 1,100 a square foot. Outside the city, a little bit less, but it's still very competitive. So keeping our buyers
sweet spot that, the big demand in Boston, sweet spot price wise.
Yeah. I think most of my buyers see a huge opportunity to refinance in the spring and summer with, the election. And this is just starting, these interest rates coming down to make a more healthy real estate market. So I'm excited for them. I'm excited for sellers that can get a better price. I think, once those interest rates come down though, prices are going to start to go up. So I'm strongly urging my buyers, I'm sure you have the same thing. As soon as those come down, people think they can get more for their properties, which sometimes they do. So
I'm not sure that I agree that prices will go up. Typically, there has been an inverse relationship. You're right, between rates and pricing.
Yeah.
But prices are at such a high anyway right now, and then now when you start adding in the new property taxes, which will also be another huge cost.
Yeah.
I just can't see them going any higher. At least
I hope they don't, because then it's almost unattainable to live in the city.
Well, and then also when people budge and they decide to move that are sitting on these low rates, then that could fuel a lot more inventory, and that supply and demand. That's when there's a big supply, prices come down. So I think there's so many variables. I think the lenders have to really jump in now and accept that if buyers have to pay their agents and the sellers don't assume that cost, then lenders are going to have to allow them to amortize that into their purchase price, because it's just so prohibitive as it is for first-time home buyers.
And VAs and anyone that's using FHA loans, all of the different loan amounts, for sure, and products, it hurts them the most.
Agreed.